Hi, and welcome to a on-the-road edition of Curiosity Not Judgment. I'm Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So we are in Florida, about a day and a half out from a pending hurricane. We're hoping that we don't have too much impact from it. I think we're far enough away. We're not going to have too much difficulty besides some wind and rain. Fingers crossed.
We're on the other side of Florida, and so never to minimize the effects of a hurricane. We should take them very seriously.
Of course.
But it will make landfall on the other side of the state and hopefully just be a bunch of rain by the time it gets to us.
Yeah. But enjoying a conference, learning a lot, and definitely there's been some food for thought over the last number of days. And I would imagine the next number of podcast episodes probably are going to draw a little bit from the content that we have been being fed by the fire hose over the last number of days. And so today we wanted to talk a little bit about what is the difference, or is there a difference between being right, knowing internally that you are right in a position, and being judgmental?
It's an interesting concept, excuse me, because judgmental, I think, has its own connotation. You know, we've defined it a couple times in this series, but I think there's a lot to do with motivation behind it. I think there's a lot of what am I trying to accomplish in my brain when I say something or do something. I remember I was just reminded recently of one of the old adages that many in my generation were raised with, and that was, if you're thinking about saying something, think about three things. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary?
Right.
And, you know, if it meets that test, then, you know, maybe this is good feedback for someone. But again, it's all about, you know, what's the motivation? Are you for the person, or are you trying to tear the person down? Are you acting out of fear and self-preservation and trying to, even if you're not trying to do it intentionally, trying to make yourself feel better in the process as opposed to helping the other person? Right.
But even of those three questions, the first one you posed is it true? And how do we come to that conclusion in a way that is objective? Because, you know, you've heard it say, well, your truth is different than my truth. And how do we measure a standard or a level of truthfulness that would then go on to ask the other two questions to warrant, do we have the conversation with that person across from us or not?
And I would say the answer to that is feedback.
Okay.
And feedback from the world. One of the ways I find out if something is true or not is if it's working towards the objective that I'm looking for. If I'm doing something that's continuously not working out for me, it's decreasing my influence with others, it's offending people, it's making people uncomfortable, well, then that's probably an old idea that I think is true that may not be, as an example.
Sure. So I know those three questions are posed to curb gossip, right? I mean, I think that was maybe the intent behind asking those three questions. So before you have a dialogue with somebody asking, is it true, is it kind, is it necessary? And much of the time, that would zip us up and keep us from pursuing that path of conversation. But what you're saying about, does it work for me? Yeah, it's a little bit of a catch in my mind, I suppose, about how that plays out in the social setting or in the, you know, curb the gossip setting versus a business setting.
Yeah, although I don't differentiate much between life in a family and life at work. I'm sure I'd get lots of people to argue about that, but it's all about relationships and influence. And you know, many times there's a lot of people that spend more time at work than they do at home, when you count the waking hours, so to speak.
Yep.
And so I think those relationships are very important no matter where you are. But I get what you're saying. It certainly can talk about gossip. It can also talk about things. I think when my mom was saying it to me, it was about, yeah, it may be true that so-and-so, you know, isn't as, you know, socially wise or is more socially inept than you, but pointing that out is not helpful, right? To that person. So maybe it's not gossip unless you're talking about the person behind their back, but even to the person, it's tough. But I want to go back to what you said about truth. What is truth, and is my truth good? And you know, one of the things that is one of my favorite things to do, it's one of my guilty pleasures, I'm not proud of this, but I love watching America's Got Talent.
Okay.
And I love the surprises. I love not the lessons it teaches me about not judging a book by its cover. Sometimes you get somebody coming up there who's shy or not very stage present or whatever, and they just belt out this amazing voice, or they do this amazing performance of some activity, and I love that. But the parts that are also enjoyable to me are the ones that are just total disasters. And I always think, okay, you think you're a good singer, so that may be true to you, to your point,
right?
But it's not true to the rest of us. And I always wonder, don't you have anybody in your life that loves you enough to say, you know what, don't go on America's Got Talent and do that, because you know, it's not there. As good as you think you are, it's not there. Or did they get that feedback and just ignore it, which is a different issue.
Sure.
But I think therein lies a clue for us. I know that I can convince myself of truth or things that I'm right on in my own brain, but without feedback from others, I think that's dangerous. And one of the things that I've done in the past is have a team, an advisory team, that are made up of different people from different walks of life, and I will get them together once a quarter and tell them what I'm doing in my current business and life, and have them tell me how far off track I've gotten in my own brain.
Yeah, that's really key. So when you say gotten off track in your own brain, it's because you've been telling yourself a story, and whatever that story is, you know, I'm going toward this goal, and things have happened to you. You've encountered people have encountered you, and you continue to formulate this narrative. And so by the time you get to that quarterly meeting, you may have told yourself so many things, so many data points from your own emotional reserve that you may be quite off in terms of, you know, trying to meet a point in the distance, and for you to have these people come in and surround you and say, hey, you know what? That doesn't sound accurate to who I know you are, to what I know about the business, and to what I know about the execution of the plan.
And I think what you just said there is key, because one of the famous books, and I can't remember which one it is right now, says when you've got aspirational goals, tell as many people as possible so they can hold you accountable to those goals. And yet in the same book it says don't tell people about it if they're going to tear you down and dissuade you from doing your vision, because they're just trying to drag you down because they haven't accomplished their own goals. And it's not a dichotomy, both can be true. In other words, I surround myself with advisors that I know are for me and don't have an agenda of their own. They're looking to see what's good and beneficial, you know, for me in my life. But you said something key there, about who you are, right? You know, I think we're constantly on a self-awareness journey, and you know, the unexamined life isn't worth living, said Socrates. And so, if that's true, then I need people around me that instead of criticizing me necessarily or my ideas, they call me forward. They call me up into who I really am, and who that person is that is their highest potential.
Yes, and not just that call you up and out, but also that maybe will challenge some of the ways that you are thinking. Because it's easy to surround ourselves with like-minded folks that will easily get entangled in the emotional turmoil that you're expressing. I'm so mad at this person because blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, your network of counselors join in getting so mad at that person. You need to have a balance of both those that are empathetic to you, but then those that will challenge the way that perhaps you have misinterpreted some actions.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. What you don't want to do is go grab your negative friends and go to the bar and pound on the bar and say, this is terrible, and let's massage each other's hearts with how unfair life is and who we should go get.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. But I think we do need to surround ourselves with people who, again, are going to call us up and call us out on things that we're doing and saying that are familiar patterns that we often get ourselves into. I know I have a few. Gary, I think you're doing this again. But again, in a way that's calling me up. I will receive that very easily from somebody who I know is for me.
Right.
As we've talked about before, I won't receive it from someone who I think is against me as well. I should be more mature than that, but I'm not.
You're human.
Well, and so, but making sure that you pick so as we said before, the person who said, tell your goals to everybody and tell your goals to nobody, is not a dichotomy. It's tell your goals to people who you know will help you attain those goals in ways that do match your values and universal values. Now we're getting into a little space that's kind of rough, is what are universal values? But at least if you have people who are in general trying to make the world a better place, and they see how what you're doing can help be part of that, and with given your strengths and what you're good at, given the fact that you sometimes have some patterns that you display that are detrimental to the attainment of those goals, and then what does the world need? That's the perfect combination, right?
Right. So I want to circle back a few steps to talking about that kind of internal barometer about addressing what we believe to be true in our own selves about a certain situation, and how it can be so warped by strong emotional bondage, I'm going to say. And I know over the course of my life, there's been a number of occasions where something has happened and my emotional response is so strong that what has become true in my head is absolutely dictated emotionally, and I could not be convinced otherwise. And so there is a danger in going with the truth if there's that really gripping emotional component.
There is, and we do sometimes convince ourselves that we are right about something or that something is true. Again, I would come back to, how's that working for you? You know, if that's causing you to lift others up, if that's causing you to walk into a room and try to add value, okay, that's probably a good truth. If it's causing you to disassociate yourself from other people or organizations or activities in a way that's detrimental, well, then maybe it's not. Now, listen, if you're in a situation that's not supporting you and it's toxic for you and you need to just get out of it, that's great. But I mean, those are much rarer than I think in my experience, those are much rarer than we seem to see on the TV or hear about in social media, where everybody's got an opinion and everybody wants to throw things at you. I think that the true toxic relationship, they absolutely happen and you need to get away from them. But most of the time, people are just trying to be on their own journey, and they're not meaning to step on your toes, and they're not meaning to seem to be against everything you want to do. They're just trying to do their own thing.
Yeah.
And they really don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh my goodness, how can I go screw over Birga today? I want to, they're just trying to say, okay, look, I've got my own issues. I'm trying to do my own thing over here. And maybe I'm not paying adequate enough attention to your needs. That's something that I'm working on all the time, is how can I come into a room and find the needs and serve the needs? And that's tough when you've got your own agenda.
Yep.
And you've got your very worthwhile attributes, right? Supporting your family, building a legacy, trying to increase your influence. Sometimes those good things get in the way of the great things of being able to serve others.
Absolutely. So if you are finding yourself in a position where someone else has believed a truth about you that is not accurate, what then? What is the proper course of action? Again, not to come in with the overarching need, I've got to defend myself, I've got to defend my honor, defend my name, defend my title. Though all of those things may be warranted, how do we avoid falling into the pit of emotional, turmoil as we're hearing something being reported about us that is inaccurate?
It's very difficult, and a lot of people, especially, we don't have most of us don't take the time to sit and reflect on any new person we meet and try to size them up accurately. Most of us just see something, make a judgment, put them in a cubby hole, and that's done, right? I often tell the story that I lived 18 places by the time I went to college, and that's because I'm the proud son of a naval aviator. And I often say that's made me very adaptable and I can come into a room and assess things and move things forward very rapidly. It's true. It also had the downside of many times people misjudged me. I mean, I'm the new kid. They've got a day and a half to figure out who I am. Yeah. I'm coming in the middle of the school year, and people are going to judge me and say, oh, this person's this way, even if I'm not. And I'm very sensitive to that.
Sure.
And I want to be heard. And sometimes I can't be heard because I'm the new kid. I want to be in the in crowd. Well, if you're moving around, I went to 3 7th grades. It's hard to get in the in crowd when you've gone to the same, 3 different schools in the same year. And so those are things that are deeply in me. You talk about emotional. Those are things that are, some people call them emotional triggers. Some people call them emotional needs. Those are things that I have to be self-aware of. And sometimes I'm in a situation, I go, why am I upset about this? Why am I, and then I'm not part of the in crowd here yet. I'm not part, and I have to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. These are really great conversations for us to have in this moment of quiet when we're not in the busyness of work, we're not surrounded by people, we can be contemplative and reflective. Not as easy when you're in the middle of a staff meeting or when, you've got work that's got to be done and you've got people on your left and your right and there's truths, I'm going to say that in air quotes, that are being thrown out there, and you've got to make some in the moment decisions about how to react, how to respond, and how to do it with that curiosity and not with judgment. And that's a tall order.
It really is, especially when you're in a stressful situation. Just the other night, we're in the rental car, and I don't even care what kind of a car I get as long as it's got Apple CarPlay. Because if it's got Apple CarPlay, I know I can navigate myself to the hotel. Okay. So we get in at 2 a.m, and we get the rental car. I'm hoping that the counter's still open. It is. There's only one person there. Anyway, but we get the car. And we're every car has its own little challenge of how to get to Apple CarPlay so that it's displaying and everything's easy and And my wife is trying to help out, and I'm going, no, don't touch that yet. Like, wait for it to respond. And I'm thinking, hold on. All she's trying to do is help here. Right? So you're right. In the moment, we sometimes go to that default. Yeah. One of mine is control in that situation. One of mine is, the frustration of how come things just aren't intuitive, right? Packaging engineers and software people just don't understand me. Right? Otherwise, they'd make things easy to open, and they would make things when I plug in my iPhone, it just pops up, right? And of course, the world doesn't work that way. And so for me to get frustrated and take it out on my wife who's trying to help is silliness. And yet I do it.
Sure.
So you're exactly right. When you're in the situation, it's much harder. Now, there's the whole book called PQ, where he tries to teach you to do little triggers to pause, right? So that you get yourself out of that situation, this little spin over here, and put yourself on a different track, right? And so sometimes that's what I'm practicing now, is I do a little thing where I touch my fingers together and I go, okay, I'm gonna go on a different path here. This one's not working.
Yeah. Well, it sounds very similar to something that we had discussed, 20 or so episodes ago about our red light, yellow light, green light, right?
Yes, exactly.
You're in the heat of the moment, you're about to respond, you're about to react, stop, proceed with caution after you've had an opportunity to kind of slow down your thinking, to do some genuine observation, a little bit of processing, and then go after you've had that moment to kind of recalibrate.
Not complicated, very hard.
Absolutely, it is.
And that's the issue, right? Is when you're in the moment. I sometimes try to think of that, well, and then I go into default mode, and default mode's not good. That very thinking is not good. It's not healthy, because if you really reflect on who you are, recently I went through a really cool exercise where I just started writing down who I was. You know, proud son of a naval aviator. I moved around 18 times. I do this, I do that. And I started out and I got to about, 3/4 of a page. And then I've been adding to it recently. And it's actually really, really cool. And so what I do is I read through that list every morning now.
Okay.
And that really helps me. And at the end of the list, I say, so you know what? This person doesn't have to be defensive. They don't have to worry about how other people are feeling about them at the moment. And they don't get frustrated in certain situations because they know that eventually everything's going to work out. And I'm paraphrasing, but that starting out the day like that gives me a chance to every once in a while remember that and reflect during the day. But I think if you're not being intentional, then and you're not thinking about those kinds of things, and you're not pausing in the moment, we can continue to get ourselves in serious trouble, and we can make relationships into vicious cycles versus virtuous cycles.
Absolutely. So as we're examining these truths that we are assuming that are accurate, I think that red light, yellow light, green light exercise is a really applicable one in this moment as well, to really stop just for a moment to analyze this thing that I believe deeply to be true. Is it emotionally driven, or is it factually true where other people would corroborate what I believe is truth, right? And then once you kind of go through that mental process for a second or two before you engage in the next step of conversation or reaction or interaction, you've reset yourself a little bit in a healthier way so that you know that emotion's not going to dominate.
Hopefully in a healthier way.
Yeah.
Yes, and I do believe that's true. Now, again, you have to come up with your own technique of how you do that in the heat of the moment. I think another way that's really useful is to take a little bit of time at the end of the day and kind of do an end of day assessment. What situations did I find myself in today? And many people recommend doing this once a day and once a week. As you do your plan out your next week, you say, okay, what went well this week? What didn't go well this week? But I think it's super useful at the end of each day while it's still fresh. What went well today? What didn't go well today? Why did it go well or not well? What things contributed to things going well? Well, I was in my element. I was surrounded by people who supported me, so of course it went well. Over here, I was supported. I was in a room full of people who don't like me, don't like my ideas, so of course it didn't go well. Oh, okay, so what could I do to intentionally change the situation that turned out negative over here? And what can I do to bring from the attributes of what went well into what didn't go well? And if I'm going to be in a situation that I know is not going to go well, what could I do differently next time to maybe try something differently and see if it might go a little better?
Yeah. Well, so to recap a little bit, I think I love the idea about having a panel of advisors. How many people would you recommend for that?
So it depends. I mean, you don't want to do decisions by committee. That's not the point. But I think I had 7. Now, you can start smaller. Listen, you got to have at least one.
Sure.
I mean, and many people have a very supportive spouse in this way. They can talk about work and other things. But if not, I highly recommend a one-on-one once a month with an accountability partner, at least. Somebody who can tell you when your life's off track and on track, and really tell. This is one of those things that, I make the statement that you need someone in your life who knows everything about you, everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and likes you anyway, right? Yeah. And have a once a month lunch or coffee with that person, and really and do this for each other, and be kind of accountability partners. If you can expand that circle to 2 or 3, that's even better. If you could get an advisory board, which is a process that we could certainly talk about on a future podcast, but there's a process by which you gather people together to do it, and how they're incentivized to do it and spend the time, et cetera, and how much time should that be and all that. But when I've done it in the past, it's been 7. But But again, at least one.
Yeah.
Got to have at least one.
All right. So start with one, go through the red light, yellow light, green light exercise, or whatever your mode is of kind of stopping that rapid fire think and response in the heat of the moment when you hear a truth that you need to react to. And then ultimately, maybe make that a long-term goal about building up your advisory panel to have this core group of people around you that you can really get genuine, honest feedback. Not yes people to surround you, but to support your dreams, goals, and visions while keeping you accountable and challenging you in the way that you think and act.
I just add to that and say people who surround themselves with yes people hurdle off cliffs faster.
Okay. So yeah, maybe another discussion for another time. So we'll wrap it here. Wish you a great rest of your week, and we'll be back together soon right here on Curiosity, Not Judgment.
Take care.